So first thing I want to say, for those who don't know, Terry retired as a cop, so I'm pretty sure that's not the first time anyone's ever listened when you spoke. Just throwing that out there. My name is Brett Cross. Like she said, I've been at the Red Cross for, this is my 15th year. I started when I was 16, teaching water safety lifeguarding classes at our YMCA in rural Iowa. And we have a saying that when you drink the Kool-Aid, you never leave, right? So I was an paid employee. I was the emergency services director in Provo at one point with the Red Cross. And so I do like to volunteer. I do have a passion and affinity for the organization. And we had a discussion. The other thing I had to apologize for is they told us that this is being recorded. So they said you can't leave more than like a 6-inch square of this podium. And then I had to speak into the microphone. So this is a little awkward for me because I normally like to move. So if I'm fidgeting a lot, that's why I can't move. So I'm just going to stand right here and hopefully not do too much moving. But oh yeah, I'm supposed to tell you to mute your cell phones, you have to take a call, step outside. We want you to visit with the vendors between breaks. There will be breaks between this session, the next session, and nothing after that because then you'll just go home. So, yeah, so there's all of our housekeeping, right? So a lot of times people say, one of my dear friends, she said this to me a couple of times too, and we said the Red Cross has a lot of resources and we have a lot of stuff, but how do we actually do it? What does that look like? Like, you say you can do all this stuff, and you say you have all this stuff, and that's really cool, and it looks good on paper, but how does it work? So my goal today is to help you understand the process of how we mobilize in the American Red Cross and what that looks like, how we get people engaged, and what we can do when we come to support a disaster-affected area. And so we're going to start local, work our way out. And so that's really what we're here today for, is to understand a little better about our process and what that all entails. It's a big process, and we move a lot of people and a lot of stuff in not a large amount of time. And so we hope that we're effective in those measures and that we have different capabilities for different types of events. And so we're going to review our framework, review our processes, and I'm going to talk to you a little about some of the changes we've made recently in the organization as well. And so, the mission of the Red Cross is still the same. We want to eliminate or alleviate that human suffering in emergencies by leveraging volunteers and the generosity of our donors. And a couple of things to clear up about the Red Cross a lot of people don't know is the American Red Cross is 100% donor funded. We can receive no government funding. And a lot of times people think because of the Red Cross, you're aligned with the government and so we receive government funding. We actually are mandated by the International Association of Red Cross Federations that we cannot receive government funding. So if we do, we violate one of our fundamental principles, which is impartiality, and we could be asked to do things that we normally wouldn't do because we receive funding. So that's why the donations are so important to the Red Cross, and that's why a lot of times our donor message is there, is because we just can't. Of all the organizations that we cannot receive government funding to do what we do. And so that's important to know. So we have recently gone over and changed our response model, and we more aligned with FEMA and the emergency management world in that prepare, respond, recover cycle. And so we took our approach and we said, okay, what does that look like for us? How do we prepare, how to respond, how to recover? Because mostly a lot of our efforts were focused on response. Everything was response driven. What are we doing to get there? So some of those preparedness measures and stuff we took to get us to that next response. But there's definitely things that we do now in recovery that we haven't done before. And we've changed some of the cycle of when we meet the immediate need, we were done. We would leave and the community would continue to recover. And so we decided that probably wasn't the most effective means. So working with our government partners and with all the other agencies, and we'll talk later about community partnerships, we stick around and we help with that recovery process. And we play an active role with the case management of those individual recovery as they go through that process, through referral services, to You know, we coined the term now in the emergency management world of a MARC, right? Multi-agency resource center. So being an active player in that resource center and being able to have that conduit go out. And so we have this pillar process. This is another one of these new terms we've come up with our approach to responding, and how do we deploy materials and workers and technology, and what does that look like? And that's where our resource mobilization and support unit comes in. How do we move all that stuff across the country? And then how are we managing information and information sharing so that we're an equal player and we do our best at the table to share that information. We wanted to align better with government. And that's because for a long time we operated on our own, and this is Brett speaking, this isn't a Red Cross official statement, but because we couldn't align with government in a lot of ways, we almost tried really hard not to, so that we could maintain our neutrality and our impartiality. But then we realized that we don't actually have to do the opposite, right? We can still align with government, we can still fit the model and be better prepared to respond, and still be impartial and still maintain our fundamental principles. So that's we decided we could do that, and we are doing it. And then we want to engage local communities more in that mobilization process. And before a disaster would happen, you used to have to take a ridiculous number of Red Cross trainings. And then once you were done with all 12 of the courses it took to get you out the door, then when something bad happened somewhere, we would send those people to go do those jobs, so wherever they were in the country, and they would do those jobs, and then they would leave and go back home, and then we would leave the community in the same state they were before. So we decided that that's not the best approach. We want to mobilize that community. So we've invested a lot more time and energy and resources in event-based volunteers. So we have some rules about with our insurance and stuff about who can volunteer and where they can volunteer, and if they can be alone in a shelter, if they've had a background check or not. And so we've decided to spell all those policies out, get them all vetted, so that now we know that we can utilize event-based volunteers, and they can come in and do a job that used to take 12 Red Cross classes to do in a matter of a couple of days, right? So if we can get you in and get you in the system, get you a background check, that background check clears, in 48 hours or so, you could be working in a shelter. That wasn't the case several years ago. In order to work in a shelter, we had a rule that you had to be a previously vetted responder. And so we're hoping that that's doing two things for us as we go through this process. The first thing it's doing is it's empowering that community in their own recovery efforts, and it's also leaving a set of trained responders in that community that's affected by that disaster and helping with that recovery process. So the next time it happens, that we've got more people that can step up to the plate and be able to provide those services without a lot of external help from the rest of the American Red Cross as a nation. And so and engaging our volunteers and employees is really important to us on a local level to build that capacity so that we are at a point where we can make sure that everyone is local. And we've charged our organization. We used to have national headquarters was in Washington, D.C. It's still there. And they were the primary response agency for anything that was, we call levels of disasters. Anything above a level 3, national headquarters took care of it. They had to come in and they took charge. And just like in the emergency management world, the bottom line is really whoever's checkbook is open is who's responsible, right? They're in charge. So if your checkbook's open, then you're in charge. And the national headquarters was operated to some degree under that same mentality. If their checkbook was open and they're the ones that are paying for this process, then they were in charge of it. We've gotten away from that now, and we've created divisions, and within those divisions we've created regions. So within the Red Cross, Utah is one region. We have 4 offices across the state of Utah, and we make up one region. But there's other regions. Idaho and Montana are one region, and Colorado and Wyoming are another region. So depending on, and those are within our division, and then Texas is its own region. So it just depends on when we made the map what that looks like. The one thing that we didn't do, that we tried really hard to do, but we just couldn't do it
financially was aligned with FEMA regions. When we made our divisions, we had to make divisions that made sense for the organization. As much as we would love to have done it with the region model, we had to do it that had to do with where we received donations and where we were heavily impacted by disasters. So Utah, Colorado, Wyoming, those being low disaster impact states, we had to somehow put them in with Texas and Arkansas and other states that have higher impact so that we could serve that whole geographic area better. And we know that in Region 8, fortunately, we're lucky enough that we don't have a lot of large disasters all the time. So when we did our division model, it came out, it had to shake out the way it did. But we tried the idea and we floated the concept of aligning with the FEMA regions, but just wasn't in our cards. So we created our own divisions, which are kind of like our own regions. And then within that division, we're hoping that that's where the response lies. So Utah, being the Utah region, we've been charged with being able to respond to a level 3 disaster in our world on our own. That we wouldn't need any additional outside resources from the organization, that we can handle that in-house, and that we would have all the necessary people who are trained, who have the resources, and that we would have everything we need to make sure that was successful. That's the goal. That's not what's happening today, but we are working really hard to train our responders, to train our workforce, so that we can keep that in-house, and that when something happens in Utah, it would be our region that would take that level 3. And then level 4s and level 5s, we would need assistance from outside areas. We've said level 5 was like $2 million and more. But now we've made a level 6, level 7. We haven't really defined those yet, but we up to a level 7, and so level 7's like Hurricane Sandy, and I like when we added because we started saying 5+. We're like, yeah, this is a lot higher than we anticipated, right? So we just added some pluses every once in a while, so we made some numbers for those. So and I hope that I'm not getting too much in the weeds on what the Red Cross does, but this is kind of what people asked for, was give us how it actually works. So hopefully none of this is too boring to you. So to get this process, we're going to walk you through a flooding scenario. And I will tell you something about flooding that's unique to any other disaster, is that flooding gets the least amount of media attention, and it gets the least amount of donors because it's not high impact. Tornado, earthquake, those high impact disasters, people can immediately see the effects of those disasters, and we respond faster and we respond more and we get more media coverage. But slow river rising, not the same, right? It can do more damage than an earthquake or a tornado, but because of the way that it happens, the slowness of it, we don't get a lot of coverage. So we're going to walk through a flood scenario, and we're going to walk through how we mobilize and what that looks like to get people moving. And so flooding is reported. Local emergency manager contacts their local Red Cross office, and they say, we have some flooding. It's affected. We make up any number of homes. It's still local. It's still small. So the first thing the Red Cross does is we deploy disaster action teams. Now, disaster action teams respond to everything from the single-family fire that burns an individual unit to a multifamily fire that burns apartment complexes, anything that's initial response worthy. So if it's flooding, they're going to be the first ones on call. And the Red Cross across the state has volunteers on call 24 hours a day whose job it is to respond to these. So we have rosters, and we have scheduled out people who respond to anything from those single family fires all the way up to when it reaches the capacity of the DAT team, then we start activating the chapter resources and getting additional people moving. But there's a DAT leader, and they've got some team members. They have the authority to release some financial instruments to individuals. So if someone is displaced from their home because of a fire, then they can come in and provide them with a prepaid Visa card, basically, that gives them a set of monetary money to go out and find lodging. We help find it, but they don't have to go find it themselves. But to pay for lodging and to start that recovery process with some new clothes and those types of things. And then that's when casework really starts for us, because once they are out there and they do that initial process, then it's on to the referrals to other community organizations, helping that person recovery. So making sure that we find them a new place to live. That if it's an apartment that burned, that we're finding something for them. And it's amazing the amount of work that our caseworkers do on a daily basis for those that are affected in Utah by just home fires. And so these teams are the first ones on the ground. They will start the process of determining if we're going to be opening up shelters, and if we need an evacuation center, that usually comes first. So we're going to assume now that the DAT team's capacity is met. They've made the determination in Utah. Our trigger for the DAT team exceeding their capacity is opening an evacuation or shelter. So then it shifts from a DAT response to a chapter response. Our disaster program managers at the chapters that are in Utah will begin working with their workforce to start staffing those shelters. So we determined, because of this flood initially, working with local emergency management, that we're ready to open an evacuation shelter. So the difference between an evacuation shelter and a general population shelter is space requirements and stuff that's in it, right? So an evacuation shelter, in our shelter training, you have this evacuation shelter and it's an empty gymnasium. And that's because not a lot of resources are going to be there. It's an emergent need that we have to evacuate certain areas and to have a place for them to go. So we create that initial spot to say this is where we're going to evacuate to. Then working with our local emergency management and other community partners, we determine the need for sheltering after that. A lot of times it becomes the same place. But so we're in a gymnasium. We determined that because of this flooding, that these people are going to have to spend the night. So in Utah, we have several trailers that have sheltering equipment in them, and we have them scattered throughout the state. We've done our best to pre-position those shelter trailers in areas of population and also areas of remoteness. So if it's going to take us a while to get there, then we've tried to put a trailer there. We've also tried to do our best to make sure that we've got resources in population centers as well. And Terry Craven from the airport has always been really gracious to host some of our bigger trailers. We have these old World War II, not quite 53-foot trailers, but they do need a semi to pull them around, and we have those pre-staged here in Utah as well, that we can release those assets right away and start opening shelters. And everyone always wants to know the number of cots we have on hand. That number changes regularly, and usually it's because we're increasing our number of cots. So the trailers are broke up in 50 to 100 bed increments, and we have a lot of them. So and then if we need additional resources from that, and we're going to talk about that scaling up from there, we have those as well. So those trailers, first on scene. And a caveat for those of you that are in more remote areas that have trailers, sometimes we have those trailers in a remote area that we may not have a lot of responders either, but we're trying to provide that as a community resource to you as well. So, if you are the one that's on the hook to open that shelter because you're in a remote area that it's going to take us a little while to get responders either from the Wasatch Front or something like that, that we want them there so you can hook up to it and pull it to a trailer, to a shelter location, and start sheltering if necessary. Now, we obviously want to be there. We're going to do everything we can to be there, but we do want that to be as much of a community resource as it is the Red Cross's stuff, right? So if that's you, make sure you're engaging in a conversation with your disaster program manager to say, what are the stipulations behind the trailer, and so that we are being as good of community partner as we can be, and not to say, you can't touch our stuff till we get there with our truck to pull it or whatever. Like, we only have one. It's in Salt Lake, so probably not going to be our truck that's pulling it anyway. That's the other thing that I've learned. When you have trailers, you have to have a truck to pull them, right? So we had to work really hard. We finally got one. So we're still working hard at getting more, but. So the waters continue to rise. We've opened up our shelter. That has prompted us to, one, begin our casework outreach with the individuals who are affected from the home flooding. It's activated our disaster assessment folks, because our disaster assessment folks are the ones that are going to help determine the need for the casework. Our emergency needs are being met with sheltering. We've activated feeding folks. At this point in Utah, if we're feeding, the odds are we've activated the Southern Baptist Convention. And they're the ones that are going to cook our meals. Now, we'll try to get some pre-cooked meals initially because it takes time to set them up, right? But if we're anticipating a shelter over several days. We're going to activate them. We have a really great relationship in Utah with the LDS Church, so and the Southern Baptist and the Red Cross, and together we create a good feeding plan, and that the LDS Church opens up the Bishop's Storehouse for the food and things that we need. The Southern Baptist cook that food, and the Red Cross serves it. So that's kind of our process right now. That's not a given. That doesn't happen on every single event, but that's kind of the standard that we've gone with. Outside of a trip to Costco for some seasonings, because the Southern Baptists aren't serving anything that's plain. I promise you that. So we'll make a trip to Costco to make sure that we've got adequate seasonings, and we will have beef stroganoff for our first meal. It's another guarantee. If you haven't had Southern Baptist beef stroganoff yet, you have to. It'll add like 3 inches to everyone's waistline, but it's delicious still, and I recommend it. So, and then we'll serve that food out of our emergency response vehicles. Also, another thing that we're trying to determine is the name of that vehicle. We call it emergency response vehicle. It's really a mobile feeding unit. So it's got a spot for trays to hand food out the window. All of the stuff we need for feeding in there is in there. But it also is used because we can open the doors and set pallets in there, so it can be used for bulk distribution. So we're playing with names of what those trucks are and making sure that that's the adequate name for it. And so we'll see if that stays the same or not. So we have 3 of those in the state of Utah, those feeding units. They are actually still owned by the national headquarters. They're under contract with the private vendor PEHP. That's my health insurance, but I will tell you who I don't know who it is. Anyway, one of those companies, not my health insurance, that manages the fleets and makes sure they get serviced on time, and that we have contracts, and for whatever reason, the name of it is escaping me, but that's okay. So this flooding incident that we have, it's grown big enough that the local chapter is meeting their capacity, and they're needing assistance from the region. So then we step up to a more regional approach to the incident. At this point, we're probably going to open up what we call headquarters. And our headquarters, just like any other EOC, requires technology, requires people to staff it, and we begin doing the process of managing that incident. We may have opened up a second or a third shelter, and we may be in coordination of getting a mark established so that we can start getting all of the community partners together in one location that are offering resources so that we can serve those people that are affected by that flood the best. So we'll open up a headquarters somewhere, depending on the size of the incident, in like hurricane-prone states. So Louisiana, for example. In Port Allen, which is just outside of Baton Rouge, there's an old Walmart that's been like decommissioned for years. The Red Cross actually has that property, and it's a hot site. So for us, it has folding tables and chairs, and it has Ethernet run everywhere, like across the ceiling, and there's drops of internet. And what happens is because we have these hot sites, when it happens, we just ship all the technology and all the resources start going there, and then we connect into that Ethernet that's in place, we set up the tables, and we have a headquarters ready to go. So we've looked for places that are large commercial spaces. Like I have my eye on the 90th South. Used to be a Lowe's, I think, right? It's closed. That's my dream spot for headquarters if something ever happens in Utah. So if anyone else is planning on using that, let me know so I can thumb wrestle you for it. But that's where we'd open up our headquarters, because it also serves as a temporary warehousing spot too to move people in, and we can train people in there, get them out, and get them moving. So that's my sweet spot. And then, like I talked about previously, Utah is one region. We cover the entire state. That's not typically how it's done across the country. It just really depends on what that looks like, but we are fortunate that we're one region. And Jalea Thompson, who's the Regional Disaster Program Manager, officer, she's actually deployed right now on what we are calling our IMTs, but we can't call it an IMT because we still are the Red Cross and we still have to make up our own names for things. So we have DRMTs, Disaster Response Management Teams, and they mimic an IMT in that we deploy a logistics person, an operations person. External relations is the term that we use for aligning with government, other community partners, or external relations folks, finance, and a job director. And so because the events that are in Arkansas and Oklahoma are large enough, we deployed that IMT Jalea is on one of those IMTs, and so DRMTs as we call them, and so she's there doing that. Otherwise, she would be the one that's up here doing this and not me. So, so you get second best, I guess. And so that's new for us. These IMT teams are new. They're within the last couple of years, and we've had good success with them. We've had good success with moving them closer, because like I said before, everything used to be done at Washington, D.C. in our Disaster Operations Center, and all the decisions were made by individual function and aligned with Washington, D.C. So if it was mass care related, mass care took care of that all the way up to national headquarters and back down, and so while we coordinated in the same headquarters, it still was, the decisions were made out of DC in those individual activities. And so that we lumped some of those together, and we made these DRMTs so that we can start making more decisions local and on the ground faster. So the logistics AD, for example, encompasses all of our technology stuff, our resources, and our staffing. And so those decisions can be made on a more local basis. So the Red Cross is stuff. Everyone wants to know about our stuff and how we scale disasters. So we're gonna say this is a bad flood, right? So we're scaling up and we're increasing our DR levels. So we have our DRMT on the ground. We have all of our activities and functions going. And so how do we scale? What does that look like for us? So we have these things called concentric circles for deployment models, because we try to be the most cost effective for the organization, right? So we want to be mindful of donor dollar, and we want to deploy people and resources the closest way possible. So we have a system, it's called Volunteer Connection. That system is where all of our disaster responders are in. All of their jobs they can do are in that system as well, and within that, we can determine their availability. They can go in and say, I can deploy to a disaster nationally, within the region, or just in my local chapter. So they set their proximity, they set their availability, and then the Resource Mobilization and Support Unit, which is the team that I'm on, it's our job to go in and pull rosters, and basically say that all these people are available, and that all of these people have these specific jobs that we need. So we look to our external relations, we say we need a government ops person that's on this for this relief operation that can supervise our teams. And so it looks like Burgess Breyer from Utah is available. So we're going to call him up and we're going to say, hey, Burgess, can you go help these people at this flood? He says yes. We work with a travel agency, CWT. They buy all the plane tickets for our responders that are going out. He gets what we call a mission card, a preloaded amount for food and allowance before he leaves the chapter. And he gets on his plane and he goes and he serves those people. And then in that system that we have for the scaling disasters, we can check them in the relief operation, make sure they get there, that they have lodging when they get there, whether that lodging looks like if it's a staff shelter or if it's a hotel, so that when they're there, they can do the work. Transportation comes into play at this point too. We have national agreements with transportation vendors. The number one that we have is Avis rental car, and we rent Avis rental cars like they're going out of style for relief operations, and that's how we move volunteers from the airport and back and around the job site. We deploy the resources. For us in Utah, the resources that come for mass care type things, cots, blankets, those types of things are actually coming out of a large warehouse in Reno, Nevada. So Reno is where our stuff comes from, but we have stuff staged all across the country, and so as long as it can get here, which generally it will be able to, then that's when our resources come from. All of our technology that we have, computers, cell phones, internet, servers, whatever else we need to meet those needs, those come out of Austin, Texas. And we have a very good technology team that moves all of those resources when needed. We align with the partners like FedEx. FedEx is gracious enough to move all of our technology equipment overnight to most disasters. So overnight we could get a large pallets of Pelican cases. I have a thing for Pelican cases, by the way, in case you didn't know. If you've ever come to my office, I got lots of them. So all of our technologies in Pelican cases on pallets in Austin, Texas, waiting to deploy in kits. So those kits deploy. We can we can get smartphones in the hands of volunteers so that they're out there. As they're out there, they can be opening cases on the smartphones, collecting information. We do damage assessment. We can be doing all sorts of stuff with the technology that we have to start that response and recovery process off. So while some of that stuff doesn't live in Utah because technology is expensive and it's hard to maintain and keep up, it can be here within 24 hours. So, and our division has the authority to release that stuff now, so we can get it moving pretty quickly. And as long as FedEx can fly in, we'll get it there. And I've never been somewhere where FedEx hasn't been able to get into, because they're pretty big and they can get most places. So, so resources come, people, specialized skills. The two areas that we usually have to pull people across the country to do, and that one of them is disaster mental health. So behavioral health specialists, licensed clinical social workers. Generally speaking, if we have a large enough operation, those people are going. So whether you live in California and the disaster is in Maine, if you're a mental health person, odds are you're going to go. Because mental health people aren't as flexible a lot of times as volunteer time, so they have to take off work and those types of things. And then health services, nurses. Nurses are other Achilles heel, if you will, that we never can seem to move enough of them. So those two jobs are hot commodities in the Red Cross world for response, but we still move them. We do a lot better about not moving now. Shelter workers and stuff like that. It always amazed me, and we had to stop and think about this. If there's a hurricane in Florida, why are we sending a shelter's worker, not like a supervisor, not a manager, but a worker from Oregon to Florida to work that shelter, right? Like, we should be able to find someone locally and get someone a lot closer than that. And that's why we changed this proximity model, and that's why we've done the work that we have to hopefully make it faster, better, and cheaper in the long run. So we've scaled up our operation. It's in full swing. We will keep our headquarters open. We will rotate staff through. We rotate staff through on a 14-day cycle. 21 days is kind of the max. Technically, we have a rule that if you're on a relief operation for more than 21 days, you have to go home for a week and come back. And you're starting to think dollars there, but it's really for their own mental health, right? We don't want someone in a disaster area for months on end, working 12, 14, 16-hour days, eating, drinking, sleeping, breathing that much. So we try to rotate our staff through. Things like Hurricane Sandy are like the exception to that rule. We just don't have enough people. And so sometimes they're going to stay for months or two. But we try really hard. 14 days is the minimum commitment. So if any of you are sitting here like, oh, this is something I really want to do, and I hope you are. 14 days is that minimum commitment. And then another caveat, if you're a state employee, the state will actually pay you to go for 14 days to volunteer at the relief organization. And so there's my next plug for all of you state employees that want some more disaster experience. And so you go out, you serve for the 14 days, 21 days is okay too, and then you come back. The other thing that we got hit really hard with this year, was new for us, was the islands. They kept getting walloped. And so my regular unit that I support is the Pacific Division, and so it's California, Oregon, Alaska, Washington, and then the islands, right? So we still have recovery teams in place in Saipan, and we're sending those people like 45-day rotations or something like that through there. But we're still recovering Saipan, and so because it's still not considered an international deployment because it's still a U.S. Territory, the American Red Cross is still responding to those. Internationally speaking, I'll touch on that for just a moment about international deployments to Red Cross. That's really difficult. We don't deploy a lot of resources for international deployments to the American Red Cross because that's not our role in the Federation. So we play well in the sandbox, and every country that belongs to the Federation has a specialty. Our specialty is basically operations management and financial management. And so when we deploy our folks internationally, the folks that we're sending are people that do management and financial resources. Other federations, such as like the Mexican Red Cross, they are health component. So they deploy a lot more resources than we do in the health components for international deployments. So a lot of times people ask why we don't send more stuff for international deployments, and that's just because we have a job, and we do our job within the International Federation really well, and we're proud of the work that we do, but it's not, we just don't send volunteers internationally. So our operation's going, everything's cool, we're plugging along. We can get, like we said, replenished resources. We start working with our other partners to get things that we might need, and then that magical time happens when the waters start to recede, right? So the flooding subsides, stays steady for a little bit, and then it starts going down. So now what's the process from the Red Cross's perspective? We've ramped up. We open every shelter. If you've ever taken a shelter class, we know this statement. Every shelter gets opened with the intention to close it, right? Every day we're trying really hard to close that shelter. That doesn't mean that we're kicking people out or that we're closing them prematurely or anything like that. That just means that we know that we've got people who are affected by a disaster who need to get some sense of normalcy back, and a shelter is not that normalcy. So what are we doing aggressively every day to get them out of a shelter so that we no longer have people in that method of temporary housing, that we've gotten them resources, we've gotten them someplace to stay, and they're out of our shelter. And so we open every one with the intention of closing it. Same thing with relief operations. We start every relief operations with the end in sight of a community that is recovering or has recovered well from that incident. So, and so we switch gears at this point. Our caseworkers that we have, we call client caseworkers, switch to recovery planning and assistance folks. So what does that look like when we start recovering? And so we will do everything we can to wrap up that response. Sending people home, a lot of times we don't need all those volunteers anymore. We're closing shelters. As we close shelters, we work daily. We buy our volunteers one-way tickets so that we used to buy round-trip tickets, and then we have to pay all these airline fees for changing, like if they left a day early or 5 days later or something like that. And it was very cost prohibitive for us to keep just changing plane tickets. So it's cheaper for us to just buy a one-way ticket, and then you get there, and then when you're ready to go home, 24 hours before you go home, you call and you make a plane reservation home, and you go home. So one-way ticket to paradise, right? And you go. So we start releasing those volunteers as fast as we can, because we're very mindful of that donor dollar, and we're very mindful of the recovery process that needs to take place. So start getting them home. We bring out specific people whose job it is recovery, who've been doing recovery on other operations, and they become the management team for that operation. And so, and how they start recovering is truly with the power of the community, making sure that we have invested enough resources and time and energy while we're on the ground to making sure that we've opened up a coordination center that has all the resources that people are going to need to recover. And we co-locate a lot of times with FEMA Individual Assistance. And FEMA Individual Assistance has gotten really good and a lot faster. We used to give out those cards we give out with money on them for single-family fires. We used to do that initially for disaster clients, no matter what size the disaster was. But large enough disasters that use the Stafford Act, the Presidential Disaster Declaration, FEMA Individual Assistance is equally as fast as we are with those CAT cards. So we've stopped doing that, and we work more with FEMA in a supportive capacity to opening cases, getting that paperwork done so that they can get that individual assistance that they need from FEMA. And then if there's other resources, Small Business Administration for loans, housing, whatever they might need, we're going to get that in that mark, right? And all of those community partners that come into play. So we'll talk about our community partners. Definitely the government and civic authorities are crucial to our response. And we do a lot of things because we want to be a good partner. And so I don't know if you remember Summit wildfires a few years ago. We had 2 shelters open. One of them was closer to Park City, and another one was up closer to Colville. And we left those shelters open. No one came to those shelters. And so a lot of people think about the success. You know, if no one spent the night in the shelter, was that successful? Colville had a couple people that stayed every once in a while, but no like consistent population in a shelter. And the answer to that question was yes, because we were helping the local government in Summit County meet their need of ensuring that people, as they evacuated, had a place to go. So we had volunteers there minimal staffing. We weren't having a full-blown staff shelter with all sorts of people there, but minimal staffing at those shelters, ready to ramp up if necessary. And so being a good partner in the community, we were able to keep shelters open and even without a population, so that we were ready for them if they needed to during the evacuation process. So other volunteer organizations. We realized years ago as well that we're not the only response agency out there. And sometimes people will say, you can't say that, Brett, because we never thought that. But that was the mentality that people had. So we're not the only ones. And so we rely heavily on other people to assist us with different things that we generally don't do. And in all of our public affairs training, if our public affairs person here, he'd be squirming. Because the one thing that we try to get away from is saying no. One of those no things we try to get away from is pets in shelters, right? And so how do we send a message that says that while we don't take non-service animals in shelters, that we can still provide support. And so that requires a partner organization to help with that pet sheltering component. So we have a unified message. We say, you're welcome in our general population shelter, and that we've got a resource for your animals. May not be in our shelter, unless they're a service animal, but we have a resource. Sometimes we co-locate those resources. Sometimes it's a trailer, or if it's a big enough school or something like that, the pet shelter might be on one side while the general population dormitory is on another side. It could be a trailer in the parking lot. There's lots of different things we can do to make sure that pets and their owners are in the same vicinity or that they're taken care of, so that it's no longer, we just don't do that. And with sheltering, again, there was an old misnomer, the Red Cross doesn't do special needs sheltering. That was quasi-true in that we didn't do medical sheltering. So if someone needed dependent equipment, we can't really do that in a general population shelter. And there's a couple things about general population shelters that I want to mention. It's really, really hard to operate a general population shelter with people who have no disabilities. And then you start adding people that have access and functional needs to that shelter, and the complexity rises quickly, and the resources we need to deal with those increases as well. So several years ago, FEMA came out with their new guidance on sheltering. So we got rid of special needs sheltering, right? Because who was responsible for special needs sheltering, medical sheltering? Government, right? Government was responsible for that. So that's where we came in, that we didn't do that because it was the government's responsibility. And so we broke that out and we said, well, we will do limited things in a general population shelter. So if someone has an access need that can be easily met, we'll meet that. So if someone needs an oxygen concentrator, we can work to get those. If someone is in a wheelchair and they need assistance transferring from that wheelchair to a cot, we can do that too. Someone has actual medical issues that they should be inside of a hospital for, they're going to have to go to a medical shelter in that model, and that medical shelter will be run by the government. And so whether that's the state government or if it's the National Disaster Medical System, someone else is doing that component of the sheltering. But we are doing everything we can. I recently went to a shelter where a person had oxygen, and they had their oxygen concentrator, and it was noisy, so they put it against a wall over plugged in, and then he had I guess most people that own oxygen have 10,000 feet of oxygen tubing. So it ran to his cot, and then we took floor mats to cover up all the tubing and spots that were in walkways, so that his oxygen concentrator wasn't where it was. So we try to make reasonable accommodations like that. Like I said, nurses are a hot commodity, right? So when we start asking our health services staff to be doing transferring of patients from their wheelchair to their bed, those types of things, we start increasing the number of staff that we need for that, and trained staff. We just don't want anyone going in there transferring someone that doesn't feel comfortable doing that. So we try really hard to meet those needs, and so that was one little tangent I went on, sorry, about our sheltering. So we really rely on our community partners to help us with this process. And so and another one that I saw when I was at Sandy, which was really good, was we had integrated a shelter with people that had access and functional needs, and then another organization came in with a shower trailer that was designed for people who are wheelchair bound. So the trailer itself, and they brought staff with them from the organization that they were with that that bathed everyone, their assisted bathing with people that were in that shelter. So we do get creative, and we try really hard to work with partners to make sure that we are meeting the needs of the disaster clients. And that's at the end of the day, our mission still stands. We're here to alleviate human suffering, and what's the best approach and what's the best way we can do that. Businesses, other organizations, we'll try really hard to align with so that we can do it the best. So in that prepare mode that we talked about in our recovery process, we're getting those relationships. All of our disaster program managers and our preparedness manager, they're here at this conference today so that we can build relationships, so that we can meet people, so that if you are in Ogden or North and you don't know who Laura Lewis is, today's your day, right? If you're Southern Utah, down by St. George, Washington, Kane, all those other counties, Georgia, correct me, I'm sure I don't get all those counties wrong. George Colston is here today to do that. If you're Provo area, kind of that mid-central area, Teresa Carlson will be here. And these are the staff members of Red Cross who are here to make relationships so that, the old adage, we're not exchanging business cards on the day of the disaster. So get to know these people, find them, ask them questions if you have any. But that's what we're doing in that prepare mode. In our prepare mode, we've really ramped up our preparedness efforts. We're trying really hard to get smoke detectors into homes of people who don't have them. And so we have a home fire campaign that the Red Cross is sponsoring, and we're installing lots and lots and lots of smoke detectors, and I wish I had a number for you. Rebecca does, so see her at our table, she'll tell you. But I know it's a lot of smoke detectors we've installed. We have a pillowcase project that's co-sponsored by Disney to help kids prepare, helping kids prepare. They go home, and what do? They annoy their parents, right? I'm assuming that's what kids do. I don't have any. So they annoy their parents, and how they annoy their parents now is in a positive way of saying, hey, look what we did at school for preparedness efforts, and hopefully creating that family conversation about preparing. And so we're doing more than just responding now. We're trying to stop those home fires from even happening by installing smoke detectors. So, and then the response mode, food, water, all this stuff that people need, their basic human needs are being met, and we work with our partners to do that, and we work with ensuring that we have facilities to operate in. And then recovery. Recovery is new for us in the last couple of years. We're trying really hard to do our best in the recovery process to make sure that we are still aligning with the community, that we're still providing resources that are necessary, and that we're coordinating those immediate resource and needs. And that hopefully, through this process of the prepare, respond, recover, that we ourselves have become a better community partner, that we stand ready to assist you on the individual level, and that we don't have people thinking that, well, we're too small or we're not there, because the Red Cross is very grassroots, very community oriented, and so we would love to train volunteers in rural areas. I really have to give it to the Tri-County area, Vernal area. They have really ramped up their Red Cross stuff as of late. And so they've have disaster instructors who've come in to be trained to go out there to build their volunteer base in that area and be able to respond better. And they're working really hard. And they're on fire right now with getting people and resources. And they have this weekend, they have some training that they're going to be doing with government ops and other folks. And so, we're not just in the Wasatch Front, right? We cover the whole state, and we're ready to support you. And so, if you don't know where the shelter trailers are, if you don't know where your closest one is, find your disaster program manager and ask them where it is, and they'll be able to tell you. They'll be able to get that for you. I tried having a map today, but I couldn't get it to work. So, but they're out there, and we're trying to GPS those and get our logistics in order so that we can show you where all those resources are. But we're still working that out. But we do have that's the bottom line. So, as I conclude here, I want to thank you for coming, and I hope that I didn't get too much in the weeds on some of the processes of the Red Cross. But I hope that I was able to paint a better picture for you of our response process. So the activation. Who's responsible? Who gets to make that decision? When we get resources, we are not tied to FEMA, to Stafford Act, to disaster declarations. We're not tied to that in any way, shape, or form. We can respond organically, or we can respond in that fashion as well. And that we are trying really hard to align with government, be more engaged as a better community partner through VOADs and other organizations, and that together, we all have a better response in making sure we're meeting the needs of those individuals who are affected by the disasters. So I will entertain any questions you might have. And I have to repeat your question. This is the other instruction that I have. So if you ask a question and I repeat it, it's because I'm supposed to for recording. So, any questions? Yes? It's a good question. I'm not sure. I guess you have to check with an individual employer if it's in Utah law and the administrative rule. Oh, the question, yeah, see, I messed up, thanks. The question was that the state pays for you to go to responses, but what about other local governments, counties, or organizations? I don't know the answer to that question. I know that it's probably up to the individual municipalities. Anyone know if your municipality or anything covers it? It's in state law, it's administrative rule that we can do. Any other questions? All right, thank you for your time.